before. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming today. We really appreciate it. This is the final of our Candid Cancer conversations this month, but based on the response that we've gotten, I think we're going to make it a regular thing. We may not do 3 in a row, but we may do 1 quarterly. And so if you have topics, please let us know. We are open to that. For those of you who don't know me and those online, my name is Lauren Roberts, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Forge Breast Cancer Survivor Center. Our mission at Forge is to support, empower, and improve quality of life for breast cancer patients, survivors, and their loved ones from day of diagnosis all the way through the rest of life. I also had the privilege several years ago to serve as president of the Junior League of Birmingham, whose mission is there on the wall. And it's a great partnership between our 2 organizations, and we are so grateful for this opportunity. They do host community roundtables regularly on a variety of topics, usually pretty hard-hitting, interesting conversations. From signing up for this and attending, you are now on their list. So hopefully there will be topics that may not be breast cancer or cancer related, but would be a topic that you would be interested in. I am going to read briefly just a little bit of each of the bios because I don't want to use all of our time today reading bios. And I'm going to refer to everybody by their first name, if that's okay, because I want to make sure this is an accessible place where you feel comfortable asking questions and you don't have to use titles. First, we have Jennifer McEwen. She holds an LLM in taxation from New York University. That's so cool. And received her JD from the University of Alabama School of Law. She received her BA from Wake Forest University. She's a corporate lawyer with Maynard, Cooper, and Gale, and she focuses her practice on business planning, estate and trust planning, general counsel services, and tax planning. All of the things I did terribly in law school. Those were not my strengths in law school, so I'm glad that they are yours. Dr. Rodney Tucker, he joined the Center for Palliative and Supportive Care at UAB in 2002. He has served as director for the Center of Palliative and Supportive Care since 2013, among lots of other roles that he has at UAB. He is interested in the delivery of healthcare and the systems involved in providing comprehensive palliative care across settings. Dr. Sharon Cook graduated from UAB in 1984 with a BS in occupational therapy, then returned to UAB for a PhD in clinical psychology, graduating in 1990. In her clinical psychology practice, she served children and adults with emotional problems, chronic illnesses, and other life struggles in Jefferson and Blount counties. After her own diagnosis of breast cancer in 2009, she gradually cut back from clinical practice, retiring in 2017, and she is a beloved volunteer at Forge and supports so many of our other clients on their cancer journey. We are so grateful for her. And Shanara Dossi earned her Bachelor of Science in Community Health Education and Master Arts in Health Education from UAB. She started her career at UAB in 2014 as an oncology patient navigator, which is how we got to know Shanara, and we worked with her at Forge in the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center, where she was also enrolled as a geriatric scholar. She currently works as a clinical research coordinator at the UAB Alzheimer's Disease Center and UAB Caregiver and Bereavement Support Services. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. It certainly is a very important topic, whether you have been diagnosed with cancer or not. It's something that, frankly, we all need to think about and plan for. It's not a fun conversation, but it's important, and we are grateful that you are here today having it with us. So I'm going to start, Jennifer, with you. Okay. And this is a loaded big question, but here it goes. What legal, it is. I hope you passed the exam. What legal decisions and documents should a person facing a chronic illness have in place? And again, probably all of us regardless, but specifically with a chronic illness, what documents and decisions do they need to make?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that sort of by document, so, thank you. All right, so I'm going to sort of go through each document that I think everybody should have in place, what that document means, what it does, and what decisions you need to make in order to get that document in place. So the first is what we call a financial power of attorney. So this is where you appoint an agent who can handle your financial matters for you. And by that, I mean, sign checks, pay your bills, sign your tax return, go get, tell a 401k, you know, that you want to change your beneficiary or that you need a withdrawal. Basically, anything that you can do in your own right with respect to your assets and your property, your agent can do that. And that's important because if you're sick and you're unable to do those sort of things, but we need to sort of keep your life, you know, your financial life going, then the agent can step in and handle those matters for you. Like Lauren said, really every adult walking around should have this. You know, we never know if we're going to get sick with COVID and get intubated or have a stroke or be in a car wreck. And it's so much better to have this financial power of attorney on the shelf, because otherwise we have to go to court. We have to get a conservator appointed over your assets in order to keep your sort of financial life going. That conservator has to post a bond. They have to report to the court pretty frequently. So, you know, it's just really important for every adult to have a financial power of attorney. When you're completing a financial power of attorney, you need to name your agent. That's the person who can act on your behalf. And then we always recommend naming a backup agent in case your initial agent cannot serve for you. You know, for sort of easy example is most spouses name each other, but what if they're, you know, both in a car wreck or something? You definitely need a backup agent under your power of attorney. Just a few more things that an agent can do. They can buy and sell property. So if you were planning on buying a house and now you're sick or out of the country, they can sign all those contracts for you. They can buy and sell shares for you if you need to liquidate to pay your medical expenses. Just all the things that you can do as a, you know, property owner, they would be able to do for you. The next is what we call a medical power of attorney and HIPAA waiver. It's sort of, you know, two documents in one. So the medical power of attorney, it really covers issues that the advanced directive for healthcare does not, and I'll explain that next. But your agent under your medical power of attorney can do things like consent to or refuse or withdraw, you know, medical care or medication. They would have access through the HIPAA waiver to medical information and reports. They could authorize the admission or discharge from a, you know, some sort of healthcare facility. They can hire medical care to help you, hospice, for example. They can make anatomical gifts, and they can direct how your remains will be disposed of. This is all in the event that you cannot speak for yourself, right? So if you can speak for yourself, if you can communicate in any way, you still have that power. But if you can, if you're too sick or you're intubated or you're, you know, anything to where you can't communicate that to the healthcare providers, then your medical agent can step in and make those decisions for you. The next one is the advanced directive for healthcare. So this document has two parts to it. The first part is what most people refer to as the living will, and it goes through two different situations, and it asks you to answer two questions under each situation. The first situation is if you're terminally ill or injured, and it's defined as at least two doctors have said nothing's going to cure you at this point and you can't communicate for yourself at this point. And the form says, in that situation, do you want life-sustaining treatment that won't cure you? It'll just keep you alive longer. And do you want food and water provided through an IV that won't cure you? It'll just keep you alive longer. And so on that form, you initial by yes or no. And then the next situation is if you're permanently unconscious or in a coma, but it's the same set of questions. Do you want life-sustaining treatment that won't cure you? It'll just keep you in that vegetative state. And do you want food and water provided through an IV that won't cure you? It'll just keep you alive longer. And again, you'll initial by yes or no under each of those questions. And then there's a section that says any other directions you have for your healthcare provider. Most people don't have any, but some examples of what I've seen is, you know, keep me free from pain to the extent possible. I've literally seen a nurse write a paragraph about the different medicines she wanted. Other things I've seen is, you know, make sure my entire family comes and says goodbye, or make sure a priest comes and reads last rites. So those are the kinds of things I see. So that's the living will portion of the advanced directive. The second part is the appointment of healthcare proxy. And this is where you name a healthcare proxy who can make life-ending healthcare decisions for you. Typically, just like the financial power of attorney and medical power of attorney, we recommend that you not only name one healthcare proxy, but a backup as well. You can name two or three if you want to, but just know that if you name two, they have to agree. If you name three, you can say majority rules or it has to be unanimous. So we see that a lot, with people with adult children. They want all, say, 3 to be involved, but they don't want there to be sort of a standstill. So usually they'll say majority rules. And then the rest of the form, there's a place for the proxies to sign, saying that they agree to serve. And then the most important form, in my opinion, or most important part, is this section that says basically how much authority do you want to give your healthcare proxy? And there's 3 choices. The first is they have to follow the directions as listed on the form. Your yes or no questions, they have to follow those. The second is they have to follow the directions as listed on the form, but they have the authority to make decisions about issues not covered on the form. And then the third one is they have the power to make the ultimate decision about really any issue, even if it conflicts with something on the form. And so that's where I have the most conversation and the most sort of heated debate, especially between spouses, as how much power we want to give each other. One thought is, I've said what I want to happen in these instances. So follow my wishes there. Don't feel any guilt about pulling the plug if this is what's going on. But I certainly want the flexibility, for you to make decisions about issues that are not covered on the form. That's the second option. And then the third option, I'd say a lot of people choose as well, which is here's what I've said. Here's my wishes. Treat it as a guide, but in the end, I want you to make the ultimate decision. Remember, the definition is, 2 doctors have said nothing's going to cure you. What if you don't, I don't know, what if you don't have a great feeling about those 2 doctors? What if you want a third opinion? That choice would give your healthcare proxy the power to go and get, a third or fourth opinion. So those 3 forms are all what we call statutory forms. They're created by the legislator, so I'm sure doctors hate them. We just try to interpret them the best we can, given what we have. But those are, those are all statutory forms. The next is a portable DNR, and we don't provide this. This is more, a form that the doctor provides, but it's just something to keep in mind. It's a form that basically says, I don't want to be resuscitated, if I'm having a heart attack or whatever it is. And that form actually has to be signed not only by you, the patient, but by the doctor. And it's my understanding that it comes on like a pink card. You could also get it in the form of a bracelet or a necklace so that, it's portable. You can carry it around with you. So I would say if you're truly terminally ill, that is something to consider if that's what you want. And then the final document, sort of the most loaded question, is your will, right? So this is the document that applies once you pass away. I should clarify that all these other documents only apply while you're alive. Once you pass away, your agent under your power of attorney has no more authority. A lot of people, get a little confused about that. So your will says what happens to your assets when you pass away, where they go, how they're held, who administers your estate. That's called an executor or a personal representative. If you create trust for the benefit of your beneficiaries, for example, minor children, you would name a trustee of those trusts in your will. You would lay out the terms of those trusts in your will. And if you have minor children, you can also appoint a guardian in your will. When you're thinking about preparing your will, you need to understand what the will controls in terms of your assets. It really only controls your individually owned assets. So a checking account in your name, a car in your name, a house in your name. The will does not control what we call non-probate assets, which are assets that are owned, for example, jointly with rights of survivorship. So a lot of people own their houses jointly with their spouse. With that sort of asset, ownership is going to automatically pass to the surviving owner by operation of law on the death of the first owner. So your will's not going to control that type of asset. If you have life insurance, retirement accounts, anything with a beneficiary designation, those assets are going to pass in accordance with the beneficiary designation, not in accordance with your will. So, you may say, I don't have a lot of assets, but it is such a good practice to go through and say, what are my assets? What controls how those assets will pass? Where is everything going? And is that in alignment with my goals and wishes? Your will can say one thing. It can say, leave it all to the kids. But if all these accounts are owned jointly with your spouse and name your spouse as beneficiary, it's all going to your spouse. Your will not trump those types of assets. So I think that's an important exercise to go through as you're thinking about, what you want in your will. And then one more thing I'll mention is I see this a lot with more senior clients. They, they're getting older. They don't get around well. They have an adult child, for example, that lives in town and helps them pay the bills and do this and that. So they say, let's put him or her on the account with us, on the checking account, on the savings account, so that they can pay bills for us and they can withdraw money and they can deposit money for us. If you put your child on your account as a co-owner or a joint owner, you have literally just made a gift of that account basically to them. Because again, when you pass away, that account is going to pass to that child outside of your will. So if you have 3 children, this just happened this week. Actually, this couple has 5 daughters and one daughter lives in town and she's on their account as a co-owner, unbeknownst to them. They just said she's on the account. And I said, how is it titled? And they went and looked and she's a co-owner. I said, do you understand that means that, and this is their biggest account, their biggest asset. When y'all die, all that money goes to your daughter and the other 4 daughters don't get anything from that particular account. Well, their will says everything goes, a fifth, a fifth, a fifth. But, this account is going to all go to that one daughter. So that was just a little eye-opening for them. We fixed it. We took the daughter off. The daughter is their power of attorney, so she can act with respect to that account. Being in the power of attorney, being the agent under the power of attorney allows her to do all the stuff they need her to do without giving her ownership in the account. So that's just something that, like I said, I see a lot. And as you're going through and figuring out how things are titled and where things are going to go, that's something to be aware of.
That's a great, wow. And I've now got a list. I got a list of things I need to think about, for sure. Rodney, so moving to palliative care, and I know there are a lot of decisions involved in that too. Can you tell us from your standpoint, what are palliative care decisions that people need to have in mind and start thinking about?
Yeah, so thank you. And that was wonderful. I'm going to take some notes and I need to come see you too. So that was fantastic. So yeah, thank you all for allowing us to be here today and part of the conversation. There are about 5 things that we want to make sure that folks understand about palliative care, particularly. And we call it palliative and supportive care because, we like to broaden the perspective of what palliative care is. So it is a medical specialty. We always start with that. So folks understand it's like cardiology, oncology, pulmonary, dermatology. It's a medical specialty that focuses on work in an interdisciplinary team. So you'll see psychologists, counselors, nurses, pastoral care, music therapy, massage therapy that work together in a team to take care of patients and their families. So that's another key. That's like the 3rd key point, to focus on quality of life. We work along beside physicians who are focused maybe on quality of life. So we look at it as there's a set of physicians in a group that are maybe trying to cure you of your severe illness or chronic illness, but we are also trying to heal you during this. So that's the 4th point. And then the 5th point is we work in a holistic manner. So we look at the care of a patient as not only the physiologic care, the medical care, but we talk about the psychological care, the emotional care, the spiritual care, and the cultural care that is important in an individual's journey. I guess where we focus and we really want folks to know is we focus on how you live this part of your journey, and how you live this part with a serious illness includes a lot of things that Jennifer just talked about, is relieving yourself of the anxiety of having these plans. So it's key that, and one of the things we encourage folks to do is have these plans and have these documents so that everybody knows how you want to live. Because like you said, all these are important for during that part of life. It's only the will that comes into, account once you've passed. And so the types of decisions are a lot of these things we've already talked about. What do you want the last year of your life to look like? What do you want the last few minutes of your life, to look like? What's important? So we ask folks, what's important now? What matters most now? So if they say, I don't want to be a burden to my family. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to leave my home. I don't want to, this is where I'd rather be. I focus on quality of life. So we say, okay, well, here are the options. Here are the treatments. Here are the pluses. Here are the minuses. So we help patients navigate a serious illness through every decision point to say there is always options. We may not be able to cure you. Most of us don't die cured. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, we don't die cured, but we can die healed. And so that's where we try to help folks make, if it's a big, a big trip, okay, let's take the big trip. If it's making sure that everything's taken care of, that's what we want to help. So we work with social workers, pastoral care, psychology, counseling to make sure that individuals are living to their fullest, during that time frame. We partner with the physicians, so it's not an either or. So I've had patients I followed for 7 years that had a neurologic diagnosis. And all along the way, working with the neurologist, working with the cardiologist, working with the oncologist, because it's not an either, it's not an either or. This is alongside patients and families to make sure that they have the best quality of life.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you work?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends on the disease process. So as you know, most of us who have a chronic illness, some would say we're all terminal. I'm just a little bit closer, so, and I'm not making light of that. I'm just saying that, we're all living, none of us are given the next 5 minutes. We have people right now, probably in our community, that are climbing up on a ladder on an anticoagulant, and they may fall and they become suddenly advanced, have sudden advanced illness. So it depends on the disease process. Where we come in for oncology patients may be a little bit different from a heart failure patient versus a patient with Alzheimer's disease. We see patients, I'll use that for example, with Alzheimer's disease, sometimes in the very early phases, to say, don't want to scare you, but here's what life may look like. Let's go ahead with these basic decisions versus somebody that today may be diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, where we have a more clear sort of prognosis. So yes, chronic illness, serious illness, and it's different where we may become more involved. That answer? Good. Good.
So Shanara, I just learned the other day, I've been saying it wrong for years, and I apologize. So somebody now knows all of this information and they want to start a conversation with their family. Talk us through that. How does that, what are some suggestions? How does that look? What do you think people should do?
So talking about these things is never easy. This may be one of the hardest conversations you'll ever have with a family member. But there's no necessarily right or wrong way. You kind of just have to take that leap and let's sit down and have this conversation today, right now. Don't do anything else, because you have people that's like, oh, we'll just, I'll read the paperwork and then we'll do it later. Nope, let's sit down right now. And it's super important because, like they said, the next 5 minutes isn't promised to us. We can walk outside, have a car accident, and you're unable to speak. So these documents need to be in place that everyone knows your wishes. It may not be cancer. You have stage 4 cancer, but that's not the thing that kills you. It's the heart attack or your diabetes has gotten too bad, anything, but we know what you want. So listen to each other, listen to their wishes, and talk about your feelings, because it's an emotional decision. It's full of emotions. And so make sure you understand the documents, ask those questions with the professional who knows these documents back and forth, knows the jargons, because it can be a lot and overwhelming. But sit down and quiet everything, all the distractions, and let's talk about your wishes. What do you want? What you don't want? Do you want CPR? Do you not want CPR? Things like, do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want to be on machines? Do you want these medications that just help you live longer? Or you want to just, like you said, no pain, at peace, let's just do this. So that's one way. You may have to come back to it a couple of times. Maybe you've got through page 1 and it's like, okay, I need a break. I need a break. Let's revisit this tomorrow, but always go back to it. Don't leave it open, because I've seen both ends where everything is in place and everything goes well. And then you have those times when nothing is in place and you have 5 kids And one kid wants mom to stay on the ventilator. Well, mom told me she didn't want to stay on the ventilator. So not just you and that person, but the entire family. So everyone hears from you that these are your wishes. And so everyone is on accord. And then if you choose to have one or two or three people, preferably just one, everyone knows that that's the person that's going to make the decisions for you. And these are your decisions.
Sharon, I'm gonna go to you. I know this is something you're passionate about, and we are grateful that you are here today. I know that you have gone through these discussions. Can you tell us why you're passionate about it and how you approached it?
Okay. First, thank you for asking me, because like you said, I am passionate about this issue. I think I'm passionate. I know I'm passionate because I lost my brother, my father, and then my mother to very difficult deaths, none of which would be what they would have wanted. My mother most recently had a year and a half in hospice. In the last, I don't know, 6-8 months, she's curled up in a bed, can't hear, can't talk. So I'm always willing to speak on this issue and really try and get people to make a plan beyond all these things that are critical, but there's more. So I have kind of a 4-point plan. And this is what I've done for myself, and I recommend for others. First, you need to be really clear about what's important to you. What does quality of life? I'm glad that was brought up. What does that mean to you? Does that mean being able to play music? Does it mean that your family recognizes you? Does it mean that you're able to speak? It's important to write these things down. Think about it, spend some time with it, and write it down for yourself. What's important and what's unacceptable to you. Be clear. So then when you come to the point of talking to your family, you know for yourself what it is you want. And I'm gonna back up a little bit. There are folks that are, probably many of us at some level, have a lot of fear and anxiety around this issue. If you find you can't talk about it, or a client can't talk about it, can't even think about it, then please come talk to a therapist, a counselor, because talking about it, working through the issues, working through what that anxiety and fear is about, and the more you talk, the more comfortable you become. So I put that in as even a first, if you find you can't do that first part. Now, after you're comfortable with it, what you want and what quality of life means to you, then yes, talk to your family. Make sure your family and your close friends, people you love, know what it is that's important to you. Talk to a doctor, your doctor. And since I've gotten a little personal on this, the first doctor I cared about greatly, I had him on my team for like 30 or 40 years. He was not comfortable talking about it. So I had another doctor that was comfortable that I could talk to about it. It's important to have that person on your team. So you have a team of people who understand what you want, what's important to you. It's written down. They have a copy of it in my case. And so when that time comes, everybody really is, I think, calmer. I think you can think about it. It's a great comfort to me. Now, I say all this and I always laugh because I'm trying to control my future, which is an illusion. And I know that, but still doing what I can, I said, is a comfort.
Yeah. I
Thank
love
you.
it. Jennifer, if a person now has this list of documents, do they need to find an attorney? Can they do some of this on their own? Can they do all of it on their own? How accessible is this and what do they need to know?
Okay, yeah, so In an ideal world, I would recommend going to an attorney because although some of these documents are available online and I'll walk through those, having an experienced attorney walk you through these decisions and ask the right questions and help you understand the impact of your decisions and the impact not only on you, but your family, I think is really important and sort of priceless, right? And there are every level of attorney in terms of, expense or, hourly rate in town. So you have lots of choices there, and don't be afraid to call one lawyer and say, what is your hourly rate? How much do you charge? Can you give me an estimate? And if you're not comfortable with that, then say, can you give me a referral for somebody that's a little less expensive? We all do that all the time. It's nothing personal. So of course, I understand coming from me, but yes, I recommend an attorney. But with that said, the financial power of attorney, the medical power of attorney, the advanced directive for healthcare, and the portable DNR are all available online. They are statutory forms. Like I said, we don't draft them. Lawyers don't. The legislator did. So they are available online, and they are the forms we use. So again, it's not like our forms are better. I just think with lawyers, you get the type of instruction and advice that you deserve. With that said, if you're in a crunch, if you just can't afford a lawyer, yes, it's better for you to have these documents than to not have them. So, you literally just Google it, make sure it's an Alabama form or whatever state you live in, because all states are different and they have different statutory forms. So first, make sure it's an Alabama form if you live here, and then, read through the questions and instructions very carefully. Read through them before you answer them. The most important thing to read through and understand on these forms is how to execute them. Many of these forms have to be executed in front of unrelated witnesses. I see that all the time. People come in, they're like, oh, I have an advance directive. I'm like, your son and daughter signed it and they're your proxy. It just doesn't work. The language right above the witness sign says, I am unrelated to the declarant. So read those instructions carefully. The powers of attorney, the financial and healthcare powers of attorney require a notary public, which most lawyers are. I am, but you can find those at usually banks, lots of offices have them. Right, exactly. So, it's not impossible, but just, I urge you, if you're not working with a lawyer, to just read those instructions, because the worst thing is that you feel like you have all these forms filled out and you're ready to go, and then they're not enforceable, or there's some argument for one kid to, say that it's not enforceable. So that's the last thing you want for your family. Yes, just like WebMD, there are wills online, and, I cringe, but they are online. But again, I just went through half of my spiel about a will, and it was 10 minutes long. There's just so many decisions that go into making a will, and so many choices. And I have seen the online programs, and they just don't give you all the choices that are available, and they don't explain them to you. So you may want one thing and you think you're getting it, but you're not, because the legalese is just not what you think it is. So while I'm fine with people using, the online forms for the powers of attorney and advance directives, I would urge you to talk to a lawyer about your will, because there's just too many things that can go wrong there. And by the time we know it's wrong, you're gone and we can't fix it. Okay. So that's the biggest issue there. With the will too, execution of the will is very important in Alabama. It's not what we call a self-proving will unless it's witnessed by two unrelated people and notarized by a notary public. And a lot of times people get the notary to be one of the witnesses, and that doesn't work. So anyway, we lawyers like to make all these rules so that we have a job, but it is what it is. So
Ronnie, I had a question I was about to ask you, but before I do, we had a question from the audience that I think is a really good one. Can you explain the difference in palliative care and hospice?
Yeah, that's a very common question. So, palliative care and supportive care, like we say, is a further upstream model. So patients can come into palliative care and supportive care many years before they reach. Hospice is a Medicare benefit. It's specifically a payor way that Medicare has for last 6 months of life. So it's fairly well defined, what the hospice Medicare benefit. a lot of the principles are the same because hospice, focuses on quality of life, working with the family, working in a team, and trying to help patients remain out of the hospital or an institutional setting.
Okay.
So it's a Medicare or an insurance, benefit. Palliative care is a model of care that's further upstream at the time of even diagnosis of a serious illness.
Okay.
So does that
And
help?
yeah, that does. My question for you is, having research getting ready for this panel, not all hospitals, not all healthcare systems have
Right.
palliative care available. So if you are treating in a hospital that does not have this as an option, what do you do?
So, there is, and this dovetails, it's a great question because palliative care has been around for about 20 years. It is growing. It's the fastest growing medical specialty in the US. It's attracting let's say a generationally younger group of physicians. I'm not necessarily one of them, but they are, I'm leading the charge. I'm a forefather, I guess, for that. So right now it is not available as a specialty in all American, hospitals. But this brings us to the conversation that the title, Candid Conversations, and in all respect to my lawyer friend, and there is a way that whether it's palliative care or it's an emergency room physician or it's an oncologist or it's a neurologist, we can have conversations that basically cut to the chase of goals of care. And that's one of our goals, is to train, even if you're not in a hospital where there is a palliative care specialist, we can ask 3 questions. What's most important now? What brings you strength? Because that brings us to our faith-based conversations, which is where most patients make decisions. They can do 5 advanced care plans. They can do everything that Jennifer has said. But at the end of the day, in the South, patients and families make decisions based on faith. And so when they're in the moment, in the emergency room, having fallen off the ladder, having to make these decisions, what matters most now? What brings you strength, and who speaks for you? We can train every physician to have simple conversations like that can basically give you the most important parts of how to make a decision now. Because like Jennifer was saying, these are great documents. I actually took my mom and dad to another lawyer, Lynn Campese, here in Birmingham. We did all of this years before they died. It never got to the doctor's office. It never got to the hospital. Okay. It was never looked at again until the day that they were in the hospital. My dad with his last heart failure, admission, when you had to make decisions then of a decision that he made, years before. Okay. So things can change and circumstances can change. We've had nurses that have put on their, and healthcare professionals, I don't want dialysis. I don't want blood pressure support medicine. I don't want this. I don't want ECMO. I don't want, because they're knowledgeable about all the things beyond just ventilator and feeding tubes. So it's really important that whether you have palliative care or not in a hospital, that we can have conversations. And it's important about the conversation. So while we're meeting here, there's a coalition, Alabama Hospital Association, Department of Public Health, UAB, to launch the Alabama Conversation Project, which is to get patients comfortable answering those questions and asking their doctor and say, what's important to me right now is, and I make that decision based on my faith, my family, my belief system. So you don't have to have palliative care to have those, those conversations. Most of the advanced care plans and advanced directives, and then I'll pass it on, were basically, it's been around since 1982. If y'all remember 82 or 84, with the Patient Bill of Rights, that every time you're admitted to the hospital, the nurse comes in and asks you, do you have an advanced care plan? Do you have a living will? It's been totally ineffective. Doctors are very pragmatic about the documents can say one thing, but what's in front of me, what's important now, how I make decisions. And most of that was derived at a very traditional white Judeo-Christian middle-class perspective about what end-of-life care looks like. And that is not all the patients that we see in the South. That's why it's so important to have the 3 questions that really trump the documents, in a lot of ways.
Love that. Shanara, you talked about the emotion, how these conversations are hard. Do you have some advice on dealing with the emotional aspects of making these decisions and communicating them and frankly, receiving them? Because it's hard to be the receiver of this conversation often.
It is. The best advice is to take a deep breath and just go for it. If you, if you weren't human, you know, those emotions wouldn't be there. So I always tell people, you're human, you're gonna cry, you're gonna walk away from the conversation, but always come back to it because it's super important. It's kind of life or death. It needs to be had. Okay, so a good example. My mom had this conversation with me before she went and had this big heart surgery. I work in this every day and it was still hard, but I also know how important it is and how her wishes are, you know, they are the top of my list of things I need to know. So it will never be easy. If it was, everyone would do it. We wouldn't need the lawyers. We wouldn't need to have these conversations if it was easy. So take a deep breath. Know that, okay, I may cry, I may get emotional, I may get angry because you just don't want to talk about it. But again, it may not be cancer. It may be something else. It may be an aneurysm where you just don't wake up one day. Someone needs to know what you want. And as a recipient, it's your mom, it's your husband. So the love of your life, who wants to have this conversation? No one. But to respect them and respect their wishes, you need to know. The doctors need to know. Fill these forms out, take it to the doctors, take it to the hospitals so that they can have this information and everyone knows. Because if that day comes and you're too emotional to make those decisions, it's laid out in black and white. And so you don't have to do anything but be in your feelings and go through, start a grieving process, which is a roller coaster ride within itself. But you don't have to do anything. You just know that, okay, my mom's gonna be taken care of because we've already had this conversation. The doctors know what to do. If you go through the emergency room, it's in the medical records. Everyone knows exactly what she wants and they're gonna do it. So that takes a burden off of you completely. And to let you go through those emotions of everything that's happening all at one time.
Yeah. So I'm not on the panel, but my parents brought in 2 of the 5 of us because they wanted different things. My dad wanted me to be in charge because he knew I would never pull the plug. And my mom wanted my sister because she was like, I might still be mid-sentence. And she's like, we're done here. That was what she wanted. And so they had totally different plans, which was really interesting. Sharon, from as a psychologist, from a psychological perspective, what is your advice or how do you feel people need to approach this issue to be mentally healthy as they go through it? Or as mentally healthy as you can be going through it, right?
Right. Well, kind of like what I said before, you have to really think about what quality of life means to you and be willing to even think about your own end, your own demise, and what you want that to look like and what's okay. Is it okay to die in a hospital or you want to be home? A lot of the things we've already spoken about. You have to, as I said, you have to be comfortable with this for yourself. So any amount of writing, thinking about it, if you've gone through the loss of someone you cared about, that will give you some idea of what your own feeling will be about in just thinking about it. So be comfortable in whatever way you need to. Definitely, like I said, talk to a therapist, a counselor, if you're finding that anxiety and fear is getting in your way. And have a lot of positive coping strategies. As you go through this, you know, unless you're in the last days, you know, don't dwell on it. They'll kind of go in the other direction, you know, and this is, again, is true for me. Although this is an important issue to me, This is not what drives my life on a daily basis. You know, I go out and garden, I do artwork, I spend time with friends, you know, whatever it is that makes you feel good, enjoy your life to the fullest. Yeah. And then you deal with this
Yep.
in a constructive way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Do we have any questions from the audience or online for this amazing panel? Yes. All right, I'm going to repeat or you want to repeat the question? Go ahead, because you know what those words are.
I think the question was, what's the difference between a medical power of attorney and an advanced directive for healthcare? Oh, okay, the people. So most 99% of the time, 100% of the time, you're appointing the same people. The difference is they're two different documents that cover different situations. So most people have an advanced directive for healthcare. That's sort of the most standard that we see. And it has, you answer those questions about life-ending decisions. And that healthcare proxy really has, I think, practically probably more power than the document says, but on paper, they have the authority to make decisions about those life-ending questions, right? Basically, whether to pull the plug, take them off the ventilator, take them off the, feeding tube. That's what the power they have under that document. Very recently, actually, my practice group started offering the medical power of attorney because we came across it and we're like, wow, this covers a lot more than just the advanced directive. Why don't people have both, right? You want somebody, typically the same person, to have the authority to make all those decisions, right? Maybe you're not terminally ill, maybe you're not quote unquote dying, but maybe you're so sick that you can't decide what medicine you want this day, or if we want to do this sort of surgery, or if you want to get admitted to the hospital, or if you want to, have access to your medical reports. So the medical power of attorney, which has a HIPAA waiver built into it, that's the part that says they can have access to your medical information, just covers a lot more, in my opinion, than the advanced directive. And so literally, I don't even ask people, do you want somebody different? You never do. You want the same people. I just highly recommend having both documents so that your healthcare proxy or your medical agent has the authority to make all decisions for you if you're unable to.
Yes.
Actually, I have a question. In kind of preparing for today and having, just by chance, having a session with our attorney for the same things. And I was asking about what I had been reading about, which is a special new type of legal document for dementia. Okay. And what it dealt with, he gave me a copy, is if what you want is in conflict with what that hospital or nursing care place wants to do. Like if they're charged with keeping someone alive and feeding them, but you've said you don't want to be fed in this situation, they are required to force feed you. That's what he explained. So I was going to ask if you were familiar with this. I think it's a fairly new document. Or similar. It's not, it was dementia and other critical issues, health issues. Mhm.
Any other questions? Are there any questions? Anybody online have a question? Does palliative care offer family counseling for children, young adults who are facing a parent? I can't see the rest of it, but basically who's facing a terminal illness?
Yes, there are programs both in the children's hospital and if it's a little bit more adult child, but counseling and psychology, and Dr. Wong is here too, that leads our program, is one of the hallmarks, of what we do. So whether it's a older adult that needs counseling for their elder parent, or their, it's a child who's losing a parent, it is definitely available. So
Well, and I'll tell you, we just ran into this at Forge. We had somebody call us that they had been told they had a month. And so we provided mental health counseling for the whole family together to be able to have these conversations before she went so that everybody was prepared. So it is important to have everybody have those conversations.
Yeah.
So it's a great question.
yeah, and there's, I wanted to just comment on what Sharon said too about it's important to know in these documents, what things in the particular setting. So, our response, if someone said that to me about a nursing home having that particulars, I'd say you need to go somewhere else, because that I would interpret that as assault. If, my, loved one was forced, something. We have had occasionally nursing facilities that didn't honor do not resuscitate orders, and they will send the patient back to the hospital. The family needs to be very aware of that, because that actually, you just need to not have your loved one there. And one other thing I want to kind of end with, I don't know if you've got another question, is I do want us to leave today knowing that what palliative care does and having these conversations, I really loved it that you framed it in the positive about how you live. I will tell you, out of all respect to folks, we never, ever, ever use the word pull the plug. We never, ever, ever use the word stop aggressive care or withdraw care. Those are things we actually teach our residents and teach our folks never, ever to say. We free from man and medicine's aggressive interventions. That's a way that we do it, because that's what's in our psyche, is that if I'm the one that's going to be in charge of pulling the plug, that means I'm actively killing my loved one.
Yeah.
And that is the farthest thing from the truth. We have many, many patients who are free from the ventilator and survive. Patients who free from the ventilator and who go home. They have chosen not to have man and medicine's interventions prolong their physiologic life, not their emotional life, not their personality, their well-being. So it's the same way with, feeding, artificial food and nutrition that's delivered through an unnatural means, which is a tube, is not grits and bacon and enjoying food. It's artificial, chemical, man-made nutrition.
Yeah.
And we don't think about that sometimes. It's like, oh, I can't let mama starve, or I can't let daddy starve. It's like, I don't think, this is artificial chemical nutrition giving in an unnatural way. And eating for us, just like we finished eating lunch, means that we're enjoying, we can smell the food, it tastes good, it gives us a sense of, fulfillment. And so when we start talking really technical about some of these interventions and things, we need to really make sure of what we're talking about. And people don't understand that, a lot of times. It's not in the words that you take in. That's why it's so important to have the conversation. What's important right now? What brings you strength right now? And who speaks for you?
And just to add to what Rodney is saying, when I talk to my patients or their families, I have to be careful what I say. Palliative care usually always goes to hospice. So I have to break that down, that they're two different things. And so I try to just use supportive care because it's more positive to them. Again, it's in our psyche. Palliative care equals hospice care. No. And hospice doesn't mean you're gonna die tomorrow. People come off hospice. And it was like, oh, really? And I was like, yes. And then they open up and then I get all the things that I need to be supportive to them.
Yeah.
So we just have to watch what we say, change words, and then we're able to serve our community, our population at a great extent.
That's great. Were there any more questions online, y'all? Are we good? I think we're good. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Janita, you had a question?
Yes. It's very sticky and it's very hard, and it holds up people signing their wills for years, but you've got, there's not going to be a perfect answer. I have 3 young children. I'm not happy with my guardian decision, but you've got to put something in there, because otherwise If you haven't appointed a guardian, everybody has to go to court and fight over those children, and that is the last thing you want to happen, right? So I just try to help people understand, like, it may not be perfect. Of course it's not perfect, because you're gonna be gone and you're not gonna be able to parent those children. That's a horrible situation. But, you know, let's try to make the transition, you know, you're gonna be grieving, or the kids are gonna be grieving anyway. Let's try to make their life just a little better by having some certainty of where they're gonna go and who they're gonna care for. And one thing I should mention, all these documents can be changed as many times as you want, as long as you're alive and competent, right? So that's the other thing I try to remind people, like, nothing is set in stone here. Everything is revocable. If you change your mind in a year, in 5 months, 6 months, come back, we can make a change very easily. So yes, it is one of the hardest decisions to think about who's gonna, you know, because all of us think we are the best parent for our children. Nobody else can parent them as well as we can, right? And that's true, but if God forbid you're gone, you know, the best thing you can do for not only the kids, but for your family is to make it known where you want them to go, because having in-laws fight over grandchildren, you can't recover from that, right? You know, and so this is getting a little more technical, but like, I'll just use me as an example. My in-laws are here. My parents are in Mobile. My mom does what I do. She's very financially savvy. She's a lawyer. I want her to have as much involvement in my children's lives as possible, but she's physically not here. And, you know, and I don't want my children to have to move, and she's still working. I know she's not going to move here. So in my mind, my thought was, all right, husband's parents are the guardians, but my mom is co-trustee, meaning she has a say over how my money is spent over my children. So my in-laws have to talk to my mom about how my children are going to be raised, right? So there's lots of ways I can help people think through, you know, explain to me the family situation, explain to me your friends, like we'll think about this together, but don't let this stop you from executing a will in the end.
And it changes as they get older. Like, I need to change mine because they were going to Dallas with my sister, but now they're in high school and they don't want to change schools. I need somebody here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really important to keep that in mind about changes too. So that's what's really important, because, you know, what we experienced over the past 2 years is that COVID, all bets are off. You could have a terminal illness or a terminal cancer, and you didn't want this, and you didn't want this, and you didn't want this. And all of a sudden COVID comes up and we have to readdress it, because now we've got a new illness that we don't really know what the prognosis would be. You might be on a ventilator just for 3 to 5 days and come off of it. So we saw lots of changes in goals of care, and the families weren't at the bedside, you know, to be able to help us. So it was, you know, horrific, but it also got a lot of people thinking about this. You know, COVID unveiled this, gosh, none of us are given the next 5 minutes, you know, one pandemic, and we're all wishing we'd been to see Jennifer.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you all very much. We really appreciate your time and expertise.